Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a disturbing nature.
And we're not going to hold back on the graphic details and disturbing content.
So we do not recommend our podcast for children under the age of 13.
And while we respect the victims and their families involved in these tragic cases,
we're also going to be critical of mistakes that are made during the investigations.
And we're going to use dark humor to express ourselves now and then.
So with that said, this podcast may not be for everyone.
And that's okay. We're glad you're here checking us out.
And if you've made it this far, welcome to the Unsung Murder Ballads family. And follow us on Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads if you want to talk to us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. This is episode 93. I am Janus dead.
I'm Jameson dead.
And I'm Joyous dead.
Well, all right. So tonight we have something fun going on. We have a case that's super famous, but we're actually not doing it as a For Joyous's information.
Wow.
Well,
yes, this one...
It still will be.
It still will be, yes. And I'd be surprised if you knew it just because you didn't know Bundy and Dahmer. But you have surprised us in the past, which is cool.
This is true. I do occasionally know a thing or two. So
yes.
We'll see.
Yeah, what was it, the singer?
Christina Grimmie.
Yes, that was awesome. You're like, I know this.
Yeah.
So this one is, there's an HBO documentary about it that when I first saw it, I could not stop watching it. I think I stayed up the entire night binging it. So,
dang.
And then I passed this, literally, like told my other friends, I'm like, you have to watch this. And it became like a little phenomenon, even among my friends, but it was crazy when it was happening. Because I saw it after it was finished airing, but they were airing an episode a week. And as a result, as we get to that moment when the last episode airs, it has a huge impact on the real world at the same time.
Oh, shit. Okay, well, it sounds like it's pretty high profile then.
This one, yeah, this is very high profile, and it twists and turns just like we like them. So, yeah, just be ready because there's lots of surprises.
I'm ready.
All right. So the teaser's a little longer than normal, but we're going to go into it because it's just too good not to start at this point. All right.
All right.
Here we go.
Let her rip.
Galveston, Texas, September of 2001. Police receive a call from a young kid who found what he thought to be a torso floating in the Gulf of Mexico near the shore.
Well, you hate to find that.
Yeah, like at least he didn't think it was a mannequin and ignore it, right?
Yep.
So Detective Gary Jones went to investigate, and it was indeed a torso with no other limbs or a head attached.
Hate that.
It didn't take long before Detective Jones found black plastic trash bags floating in the water. And yeah, that's what happens, right?
Yeah, classic.
And as you can imagine, these bags contained the severed arms and legs of the victim, but there was still no head among them. Police searched for several days looking for the head, but were unable to recover it. They did, however, find a newspaper in one of the bags that had an address. It's 2213 Avenue K in Galveston. The owner of this building was a man named Klaus Dillman, and he rented the apartment, he rented the building out like as apartments. One of the tenants was a man named Morris Black who lived in apartment 1. In apartment 2, he was renting that apartment to a little old mute woman named Dorothy Siner. Miss Siner had paid her rent for the entire year in advance.
Damn.
Wow, what was she doing for work?
We'll get to that.
Possibly disability benefits?
We'll get to all that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure we will.
She's a hit woman.
As police focused their attention on the apartment on Avenue K, there they started finding blood evidence that had been cleaned up leading into apartment 2, Dorothy Siner's apartment. A search warrant was obtained, and they found a pristine apartment, but there were drop cloths on the floor in the kitchen.
Did it smell like she'd been cleaning?
They actually didn't go into what it smelled like, or if they did, I didn't remember hearing it, like when I watched the documentary.
Because normally with a scenario like that, you would expect it to smell like
bleach,
a hospital.
Yeah. So when police pulled the drop cloths away, they noticed small cut marks on the linoleum on the floor. And of course, from there, they cut away a section of the linoleum, and they found blood stains on the boards beneath it. And they would eventually match the blood to the DNA of Morris Black. the person from apartment 1. So Detective Cody Cazales, who was working the case, spoke with the landlord, and he was told that the old lady in apartment 2 is never there because she travels all the time.
Huh.
Now, Detective, Cazales is sitting there thinking to himself, well, if she has so much money to travel all the time, why does she live in this dumpy apartment?
True.
So Dorothy Siner, the old woman living in apartment 2, was described as being a mute woman that is particularly unattractive.
Well, that's awful kind.
Yeah, well, you should hear how they describe it in this documentary. It's even less kind.
Huh.
Now,
really ripping into this poor old woman.
Right. But as police keep digging, they realize that among the few things in the apartment, there is nothing to suggest that a woman lives there at all.
Oh, shit.
Oh.
So the landlord...
That's interesting.
So the landlord did report that he saw a man there occasionally who was supposedly Dorothy's brother-in-law, but he never spoke to the man. So Detective Cazales realizes that Dorothy Siner probably isn't real and is probably just a cover for the man who was actually living there. Which, if you think about it, how brilliant is that? If you're going to disguise yourself as a woman, you really don't want to talk. So therefore, being mute is perfect.
It is one of the harder things to fake. True.
So the police go through the trash from the building and discover a receipt for a pair of eyeglasses with a date and time for them to be picked up that hasn't come up yet. On the receipt is the name Robert Durst. Cazales takes the receipt to the eye clinic knowing it's a long shot, and he leaves his card with the person that works there in case this Robert Durst person comes to pick up the glasses. Quick side note, among the other items found in the trash was a receipt for tools from a hardware store, including a bow saw, which could very much be used in dismembering a body.
Yep.
Amazingly, Cazales received a call from the eye clinic, and police were able to make a traffic stop on Robert Durst.
Wow.
One of the items seen inside the vehicle, simply by just looking in the back window, was a bow saw.
How idiotic can you be? Seriously?
I'm telling you,
we
man.
know the answer to that question is very.
So Robert Durst was, of course, arrested. Robert Durst is a short, skinny, older man described as looking like a librarian, which fits. Cazales explained to Durst that he had been arrested for homicide and that his bond had been set at $250,000.
Damn, that's some bond.
So he said that Durst then asked him what he should do. And Cazales responded by saying, I don't know. Do you have $250,000? To which Durst calmly responds, well, not on me.
Huh.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yep. So this
Interesting way to respond to that question.
right. So
Sir?
This is the insane case of Robert Durst. And let me tell you, like I said before, buckle up because this one's full of some seriously crazy twists.
All right. Well, I'm buckled. How about you?
I'm in for it. Let's go.
Good. All right. So again, I'm going to keep going with this section. The reason I'm sticking with this particular, starting with this part is the documentary, The Jinx, which was created by Andrew Jarecki. He told this story perfectly in his documentary. And even though I spent a lot of time trying to decide how I can redo it, his still works as the already created perfect way to tell the story. So in my retelling of this case, I am honoring what Jarecki has done as a filmmaker, not stealing his ideas. I want to say that. With that said, Durst called his wife Deborah to inform her of what was going on and told her that he needed $250,000 for bail. She told him it would be there in the morning.
Damn, she loyal as fuck.
It's crazy we'll get into Deborah a little bit later too. Yes, but very loyal.
I'm sure she's a piece of work.
Just wait. It was the next day that Galveston police learned who Robert Durst really was.
A psycho?
We'll go a little further into details about him soon enough, but Durst was from one of the richest real estate families in New York City. And his first wife had disappeared under suspicious circumstances.
He killed her.
Right, exactly.
Never a good sign.
But we'll get into some of that later. But the Durst family owns many of the corporate office buildings in New York City and is known as the Durst Organization. Now, the New York District Attorney, Jeanine Pirro, went down to Galveston because she wanted to get a look at Durst, as she had recently just reopened the case about his first wife's disappearance.
Oh, the plot thickens.
The day of Durst's arraignment in Galveston, he was a no-show.
Naturally.
He had skipped out on bail and was on the run.
Say it again with me, folks. Bail shouldn't exist.
Especially for the rich.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, a side note, Robert Durst's brother Douglas hired a bodyguard after he learned that his brother was on the run. So, yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah, but we'll touch more on that also later, because this is how fucked up this case is. As the FBI put Durst's name out there, they even added it to the FBI's most wanted list, and they even included the name Dorothy Signer on the list. Now, for the record, Dorothy Signer was a person Durst had gone to school with when he was young.
Interesting.
Oh, so she did exist.
She did exist, but not the way he presented.
She was around. He was just like, I remember this name. What if I pretended I was this person?
Right, and this poor woman's name ended up on the FBI's most wanted list for nothing of her own doing. You know, she's probably dead at this point, but who knows?
Probably.
So Durst,
a cruel serial killer joke,
right? Durst was eventually arrested at a Wegmans in Pennsylvania after he stole a sandwich.
Dude, why are
really? You have all that money and you're just gonna steal?
Just hold on. This is so much better. He had shaved his head and eyebrows and had over $500 in his pocket when he did it.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah.
Some people do crime because they need to. Some people just do it for fun.
Exactly. In the car that he was driving, they also found 2 guns, some marijuana, $38,000 in cash, and Morris Black's ID. The Durst organization initially hired a lawyer to defend Durst, but his second wife, Deborah, demanded that he dismiss the lawyer and get his own attorneys, because she didn't trust anyone that came from his brother, Douglas.
That sounds reasonable.
Sounds like some Game of Thrones shit, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So Durst,
if any of that family got together, it'd be the Red Wedding all over again.
Yes. So Durst hired attorneys Dick DeGuerin and Mike Ramsey, spending an estimated $1.8 million on the 2 of them.
What?
Yeah. Now, we're going to return to this trial soon enough, but first we're going to go and look at the early life of Robert Durst.
Well, now we're cranking it back.
Now
that
we do have to, because you got to understand this to understand what's next. It's amazing. I'm telling you, Andrew Jarecki did a great job how he put this together, and there was no better way to tell this case. Like, he really did an amazing job.
And what's the name of it again?
The Jinx.
Okay, I'll have to watch that then.
So Robert Durst was born in New York City on April 12, 1943, and grew up in Scarsdale, New York. He was the eldest son of real estate magnate Seymour Durst and his wife Bernice. His parental grandfather, Joseph Durst, originally a Jewish tailor from Austria-Hungary, immigrated to the U.S. in 1902 and eventually became a real estate manager and developer, founding the Durst Organization in 1927. Robert's 3 younger siblings were Douglas, Tommy, and Wendy. When Robert was 7, his mother, at 32 years old, died by suicide by jumping from the roof of their family home.
Oh my God.
That's rough as fuck.
Durst claims he witnessed it, asserting that moments before her death, his father walked him to the window from which he could see her standing on the roof.
What?
What the fuck?
Yeah, so my take on this is maybe the father was trying to, shake the mother out of whatever she was dealing with by being like, look, here's your son, don't do this.
I was thinking just his father's an absolute psychopath too.
That's possible as well. Because Douglas, the next brother, basically says that he doesn't think that actually happened.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's really tough to say. But either way, his mother did commit suicide when he was young.
Awful.
Now, as children, Robert and Douglas underwent counseling for sibling rivalry. So these two pretty much hated each other from a young age.
That's not even a type of counseling I've ever heard of before. That's kind of wild.
Well, I was going to say, this is 1950s, so they probably don't even understand counseling fully. You know,
Yeah, it was much less developed, and there weren't a lot of psychological models at that time.
I was gonna say, what years were Freud? I don't remember.
Freud was early 1900s.
So in 1953, a psychiatrist report on the then 10-year-old Robert mentioned, quote, personality decomposition and possibly even schizophrenia, unquote.
It's not one that I've ever heard before.
Yeah, again, 1950s, tough to say. So in my opinion, as in many others as well, it's likely that Robert Durst was on the autism spectrum, possibly having Asperger's.
Asperger's is a antiquated term.
Is it?
Fun fact, we can have an aside here about why a lot of people in the community not use Asperger's is because Dr. Asperger was a Nazi doctor, and his entire project, like the quote unquote research he was doing on people in the camps, was determining at what level someone was deserving to live, basically, or like how much autism you could have before he thought that you should be killed and were
Wow.
like unfit to live. Quote unquote Asperger's was he was like, okay, I think you should live.
Okay, I get it now. All right,
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up, right?
So we just say the autism spectrum then?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I didn't know that, and I'm glad I now know that.
Yeah. Pretty whack. A lot of people don't know it, and it's like, damn, we're literally referencing Nazis. Can we not?
Well, it's like I hate when people use the term rule of thumb, because that comes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another one that bugs me. But you can only fight that so much because
it's true.
Yeah.
You gotta pick your battles, but I'm like, I know you'll hear me when I'm like, hey, it's
Right.
Nazis.
Right. So I'll stop using that term, even though that's what they determined then. But we'll get to it. Okay, moving on. So,
Actually, before we move on, quick
ahead.
side note. So Freud was born in 1856 and died in 1939. So anywhere between those.
Ooh.
Okay, good to know. So so most of his research would have been early 1900s. So you called it.
We out here learning and being correct today.
Right.
I'm loving it.
Our listeners get an honorary degree.
I actually had a friend take a listen recently and was like, do you have a psych degree? You know so much about this. And I was like, no, I just read a lot of Wikipedia. I do a lot of research.
Yeah, someone at work said, based on the podcast, she said to me, if I ever have to hide a body, you're the one I'm calling. And I'm like, don't, because I'm turning you in.
Right? Yeah, no, but she is. I mean, she's right.
Yeah, like, if there's any one person that she knows who probably knows how to do it, yeah, it's probably me, you know. But
Hardcore,
still.
yeah.
Okay, finally moving on. Durst also stated that throughout his childhood, he would often run away, and on some occasions, the police were called to find him. He would attend Scarsdale High School, where his classmates described him as a loner. He earned his bachelor's degree in economics in 1965, where he was at Lehigh University, where he was a member of the varsity lacrosse team and the business manager of the student newspaper.
Oh.
Later that year, Durst enrolled in a doctoral program at the University of California, Los Angeles, where he met a woman named Susan Berman, but eventually withdrew from the school and returned to New York in 1969. Keep the name Susan Berman in your back pocket, as we're going to touch on her more a little later.
All right, Susan.
In late 1971, Durst met dental hygienist Kathleen McCormick. A year out of high school in 1971, she had traded a quiet life in the Long Island suburbs for a walk-up apartment in Manhattan and a job that barely covered her bills.
Oh, ain't that the New York life, huh?
Right? But meeting people whose life was so different from her own was part of what made living in the city exciting for Kathy.
True.
Kathy was the youngest of 5 siblings and from a close-knit, lower-middle-class family where money was pretty much always tight.
Mm-hmm.
So her and Robert started dating, and no one disputes that Robert and Kathy Durst enjoyed the recreational drugs that flowed in certain social circles throughout New York, as in like Studio 54 and places like that. But her friends and family say that Kathy was intensely focused on becoming a doctor. She was the youngest of 5 children, and she was doted on by her parents and her siblings. This family was really close. Their lives changed in 1966 when Kathy's father was diagnosed with colon cancer. His illness planted a seed in Kathy, who helped care for him, and her father died at 56 the following year when she was only 14 years old.
Dang.
Her mother, Anne, eventually went to work at the telephone company to help make ends meet, and Kathy had part-time jobs to also help out. After she graduated high school, Kathy tried to figure out what her next steps would be when a younger friend from school also graduated, and the two decided they were just going to move to Manhattan. Kathy got a job as a dental assistant while occasionally picking up extra work at Saks Fifth Avenue. After meeting Robert Durst, their romance moved very quickly. After only 2 dates, Durst asked her to join him in Middlebury, Vermont, a small college town where he had bought a small health food store that he called All Good Things. Durst had no interest in working for the family business for his father. He wanted a quieter life.
Fair enough.
Kathy moved to Vermont with him in January of 1972, gradually taking on more and more responsibility for running the store because Bob, coming from the rich background that he did, he wasn't so big on showing up on time and sticking to schedules and, things like that.
Yeah, tracks.
Yeah. Durst and Kathy, as well as their friends, referred to this time period as their laid-back, back-to-the-land hippie life. One of her brothers said, he was like Prince Charming and she was like Cinderella in the very beginning.
Interesting.
It always starts off well.
It always starts off well.
And then it just nosedives.
And here we are.
Here we are.
However, Durst closed the store in 1973 when his father convinced him to return to New York and work at the Durst organization, and the couple returned to Manhattan.
I love it when rich people are like, I'm going to go be a hippie for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just going to do this and then go back to the old life. Yeah, fuck you. I wish. Right?
Right? Like, wouldn't it be nice?
So just a quick flash forward here so that we can kind of cover all the history of Durst's involvement with his family company, just so I don't have to cover it again. His involvement with the family company in 1992, due to Robert's inappropriate conduct, his father broke with tradition and appointed Douglas to be the person to take over the organization.
Oh, that could not have gone over well.
Well, as the firstborn, Robert felt entitled to inherit the company despite his disdain for it. He claimed that Douglas had stolen what was rightfully owed to him, leading to Robert's estrangement from his family. He eventually sued for his share of the fortune and was bought out of the family trust for $65 million in 2006. So yeah.
What?
Damn.
Yeah.
Holy hell.
Yeah. That's how much money this family has. Think about that.
Oh my God.
So going back to Kathy and Durst, they got married on April 12th, 1973. Durst never really clicked with anyone, but in particular, he didn't click with Kathy's family. Now, some of this can be easily attributed to his autism, but his inability to make it through a night with what is essentially a typical American family caused tension between Durst and Kathy.
Yeah, I bet.
So, in 1976, Kathy had become pregnant, despite the fact that they had agreed they wouldn't have any children. Durst has stated himself in an interview that he made her get an abortion.
Oh,
Yikes.
okay.
Yikes, that's really awful.
In December of 1981, Kathy had been treated at the Bronx Jacobi Medical Center for facial bruises. She told a friend that Durst...
Yeah, just like the yikes at the fact that that's a thing that exists. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Hate that.
She told a friend that Durst had beaten her, but she did not press charges over the incident.
He'll change.
Yeah, I can change him.
Or it's just, you can't sue a rich man.
That's true, too, but you can get the fuck out. Which is about which leads to my next statement.
Well, you can try, but he'll fucking find you.
Well, I was going to say this leads to my next statement, which I really regret having just randomly thrown that out there, but it's going to fit well. So on or around January 28th, Kathy went to a lawyer and asked Durst for a $250,000 divorce settlement. Instead of accepting it, Durst canceled her credit cards, removed her name from their joint bank account, and refused to pay for her medical school tuition.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Kathy did not leave Durst, and those around her were concerned for her safety. So it's now 1982, and Durst told Kathy that he wanted her to come with him to their South Salem, New York home. Even though she didn't want to go, she went. Then, Kathy McCormick Durst went missing. She was last seen by someone other than Durst on the evening of January 31st, 1982, when she appeared unexpectedly at a dinner party thrown by her friend Gilberta Najami in Newtown, Connecticut. Gilberta noticed that Kathy was wearing red sweatpants that night, which was odd because Kathy never dressed that casually in public. After receiving phone calls from Durst, Kathy was becoming upset and she left the party to return to their cottage in South Salem. Although the couple was known to have fought that evening, Durst initially maintained that Kathy had returned home, they ate, he had driven Kathy to a commuter rail in the town of Katona, to go to New York. Durst also stated that he later drank with a neighbor, had a couple drinks with a neighbor, and had spoken to Kathy in their Manhattan apartment, him using a payphone later that evening. When Durst talks later to Andrew Jarecki for the documentary, his versions of event are quite different.
Oh, he talks to the guy.
Oh, yes, it's amazing, but we'll get into why. It's amazing. But that's later. He tells Andrew that when Kathy returned from the party, she wanted to return to New York, but he didn't want to go. So the whole idea that they sat and had dinner didn't happen. He stated that she was too drunk to drive herself, so he took the keys to the car, and that led to an argument which included what he referred to as pushing and shoving. He later admitted to lying to police about having a drink with the neighbor, and that he also lied about having called Kathy in Manhattan from a payphone, and that he had actually just returned home and went to bed after dropping her off at the train station. Durst said that he lied this way because he just wanted the cops to leave him alone. He was just hoping to make it all go away.
Oh my God, what a stupid thing to do.
Well, we'll get into it. So at Gilberti's house, before she had left, Kathy and she had made plans to meet up at a place in Manhattan called the Lion's Gate. When Kathy failed to appear to that meeting, Gilberta grew concerned and repeatedly called the police over the next several days. Both a doorman and the building superintendent at the couple's apartment on Riverside Drive claimed to have seen Kathy at the building on February 1st, the day after she was last indisputably seen. The doorman additionally said that he had only seen her from behind, and it was from a half a block away, so he couldn't really be certain it was her. On February 4th, a supervisor at Kathy's medical school telephoned Durst to say that Kathy had been absent from her classes all week after she had called in on February 1st, telling him that she was sick and wouldn't be in for her classes. Now, whether Kathy made that call herself is unknown, which, let's be honest, probably not.
Probably not, yeah.
Later that week, Durst finally reported his wife missing. 3 weeks after he reported her missing, the superintendent of Riverside Drive found some of her possessions in the building's trash compactor. Durst initially offered $100,000 for his wife's return, but then almost immediately reduced it to only $15,000. Right? Now, when one of Kathy's friends and her sister learned that she had been reported missing, they broke into the South Salem cottage hoping to find her or presumably any signs of her. Instead, they discovered the resident being ransacked, and Kathy's mail was left unopened and her belongings were in the trash.
Yikes, that is a massive red flag.
Yup. After Kathy's disappearance, the New York Police Department said that Durst had claimed that he had last spoken to her when she called him from their Riverside Drive apartment. He maintained that the last time he had seen her was at the Katona station where she was planning to board the 9:15 train to Manhattan. The police didn't take any of this very seriously. They essentially took it as a rich woman leaving her shithead husband, and they did little all else.
It always starts that way too. Why don't they? I want to hear a case where they take it seriously right away.
It's so disappointing. And the worst part is, right, here's where there's I'm not going to cover too much of this, but there's a lot of speculation about what did the other Durst family members know? Because you're talking one of the richest, most powerful real estate families in New York City, and no one does anything to help look for her. It's really weird, Yeah,
it doesn't really make sense. It's like if she was really missing.
Right. Someone would have done something. So, 8 years after her disappearance, Durst divorced Kathy, claiming spousal abandonment. So in 1999, the New York State Police quietly reopened the criminal investigation into the disappearance, officially searching the South Salem cottage for the first time.
Someone
17
goes missing
years.
and you don't even. Oh,
Nope.
yeah. That's.
Yep. 17 years too late. You know?
Yep. Way
Crazy.
too fucking late. Insane, actually.
Divers were sent into the lake and they found a little hidden area in the cottage where they searched, but obviously nothing was found 17 years later.
17 fucking years later, yeah.
Yeah. The investigation became public knowledge in November of 2000, and that's when District Attorney Janine Pirro was involved in the investigation with Kathy's disappearance and certainly wanted to sit down with Robert Durst.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on a little side note, I have to say that Janine Pirro, at this point in her career, is at the top of her game. She's ambitious and really hardworking, and I had a lot of respect for her when I saw her in this documentary and other interviews. I even went and read her book on Robert Durst.
Oh, wow.
More recently, however, Janine Pirro is on Fox News and has become, from my point of view, little more than a conservative mouthpiece.
Ugh, that's a shame.
Yeah, there's a part of me that hopes she's just doing this for the paycheck, but maybe she does believe everything she's saying, and if
But
so...
girl, how badly do you need a fucking paycheck?
I know. From my point of view, it's a massive fall from grace, but it is what it is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I did have a lot of respect for her years ago, and now it is what it is. So, anyway, back to Durst. After he was tipped off by his sister Wendy that Kathy's investigation was reopened, Durst went into hiding and he moved to Galveston, Texas, disguising himself as a mute woman to avoid police. Investigators in New York began speaking to all the people that had given statements almost 20 years prior. Many of those individuals told police that they needed to speak to a woman named Susan Berman. Now, Susan Berman was the woman he met in college that I had told you to keep in your back pocket. Susan was the daughter of David Berman, a major Jewish-American organized crime figure who was associated with the infamous mafia group called Murder Incorporated. And they later...
No, they're not really called that, are they?
That was their, in mafia name. They were called Murder Incorporated.
That's fucking nuts.
It's crazy. And they've done some of the most heinous crimes in the mafia. I read a book on them. It was amazing. But David Berman was actually... He also later took over the Flamingo Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. So Susan wrote a book titled Easy Street about her father and her early life. And to say that she idolized her father would be a massive understatement. When Kathy disappeared, Susan called Durst to see if there was anything she could do to help him. And he had Susan contact the reporters for him. So anyone who wanted to talk to Robert Durst actually ended up speaking to Susan Berman. And she didn't hesitate to help him in his time of need. She became his spokesperson. She even facilitated Durst's public alibi, pushing the facts, quote-unquote facts, that Kathy had returned to the city and stating which people had seen her just to reinforce this idea. It's theorized that it was Susan who had called Kathy's school to tell them that she wouldn't be in that day.
Yeah, so at least sound like a woman's voice.
Exactly. So as investigators started looking back, they began to realize that there is no credible evidence that Kathy ever left the cottage in South Salem, only what Susan and Durst had been feeding the public, and everybody ate it up. One thing that stood out to police as they were looking back is the day Durst reported Kathy missing, because he had driven down to the precinct, but he didn't drive his own car there. And they started looking back thinking that maybe he purposefully left the vehicle behind on the off chance that they might want to look at it or look into it and see any evidence that might have suggested that she could have been in the car, like in the trunk, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So police then start looking at phone records, going back almost 20 years. Again, way too late. And they find out that there were calls that were made to the offices of the Durst organization that were collect calls that came on the Tuesday after Kathy disappeared. As they dug deeper, they learned that there were only two people in the Durst organization that made collect calls to their offices: Seymour Durst, the owner, and Robert. And we're going to say it's safe to assume that Seymour probably wasn't the one making these calls, especially because they were coming from a place called Ship Bottom, New Jersey.
Yep, I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
Yep. Ship Bottom is not too far from Atlantic City, and it's also not too far from a place called the Pine Barrens, which is well known for being an area where the mafia disposes of bodies. And this was made super famous in this great episode of The Sopranos.
We love The Sopranos.
Yes. So you can imagine it's probably Robert Durst in New Jersey making collect calls to the Durst organization for some reason just a few days after his wife goes missing. How?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
it
is
doesn't add up.
not exactly mysterious, is it?
It's really not when you look at it. So it's also speculated that perhaps Susan Berman had a connection or two with the mafia that might have helped or advised Robert Durst. But I also want to say that it's also entirely possible that Durst already had these mob connections, as the mafia has their hand in every aspect of New York construction and unions, so it's not hard to imagine that they know people in New York real estate.
Oh, absolutely. And he's a rich person.
Exactly.
So that's business, baby.
Exactly. So in the years that followed Kathy's disappearance, Susan would eventually move to Los Angeles. Friends of Kathy's had already done all the legwork and gave police Susan Berman's address and told them where to go to speak with her. In 2000, when friends of Susan in Los Angeles asked her if she had seen that Kathy's case was being reopened, Susan reportedly said that she didn't want to talk about it, only saying that they were out to get Bobby, meaning Durst.
Wow.
At the time, Susan was having serious money problems and was working hard to get a screenplay that she had written bought, and she was hopeful that it would be her saving grace. She was borrowing a lot of money and was months behind on her rent. Susan did reach out to Durst and told him that the police wanted to speak to her about Kathy. Now, some think that maybe Susan implied that she needed money and that if he didn't give her some, she might sell information. With that said, on December 21st, 2000, Susan Berman was found murdered in her home in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles, after her neighbors called the police to report that her door was open and one of her dogs was out loose. There were no signs of forced entry, and she was shot in the back of the head. Susan had at one point started dating a man that had 2 children, and even after they broke up, she had maintained a relationship with those kids. In the documentary The Jinx, Andrew Jarecki speaks with Sarab and Mela Kaufman, the children of her ex. Sarab is going to play a key role in the events to come, so once again, keep this person in your back pocket. So for now, I will only state that Sarab and Robert Durst became close after Susan's death because Sarab knew that Durst was important to Susan. Durst is known to have been in Northern California days before Susan's death and to have flown from San Francisco to New York the night before Susan's body was discovered. Susan's biographer, Kathy Scott, has asserted that Durst killed her because she knew too much about his wife's disappearance, which, obviously.
Yeah, okay.
Duh.
Now, the first obvious suspect is Durst, but Susan was also working on a mob story that was going to come out, and many police also speculated that it could have been a mob hit, because being shot in the back of the head is a traditional mob execution, so on the surface, I guess it's not an easy call for police to make.
Yeah, it's definitely sus in a lot of ways, and we'd probably be calling them dumb if they assumed one way and it was the other way.
Exactly. However, a few days after Susan was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department, postmarked December 23rd, contained Susan's address and the word cadaver.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Police literally opened this letter and it has her address and just the word cadaver. However, on the envelope, the word Beverly was misspelled by adding an extra E at the end, so it's Beverley instead of just Ly. That's going to be important later, but that also kind of eliminates the idea that it was a mob hit.
Interesting.
Because realistically, only someone who wanted Susan's body found would have sent that letter, and it's probably someone that wouldn't wanted her body to decompose too badly before being found. Someone who cared about her.
Fair enough.
So when Durst is asked about this letter during the documentary The Jinx, he states that it didn't make sense for someone to have sent the letter because you open yourself up to the chance of getting caught. And he also says that the letter was something only the killer could have written.
Interesting thing to say.
On October 9th, 2001, Durst was arrested in Galveston shortly after body parts belonging to his elderly neighbor, Morris Black, were found floating in the Galveston Bay.
Well, damn. And you know the New York PD were
Oh, yeah, chomping at the bit, right? He was released on $250,000 bail and missed the court hearing on October 16th, and a warrant was issued for his arrest on the charge of bail jumping. When interviewed by Jarecki for the Jinx documentary and asked if he knew he was going to skip out on bail, Durst said, "Goodbye $250,000. Goodbye jail. I'm out."
Wow.
huh.
Fucking guy. On October 30th, Durst was caught inside a Wegmans supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania after trying to shoplift Band-Aids, a newspaper, and a chicken sandwich despite having $500 in cash in his pocket.
That's just the definition of entitlement. Like,
What an
come on.
absolute fuck.
Yeah, he's fucking an idiot, right? Among the other things found in his car, like along with the $37,000 and all that other stuff, were actually directions to Gilberta's Najami's home in Connecticut. Kathy's
damn.
friend. Yeah, so that's fucked up.
Yeah, I don't like the sound of that. I'll say that.
So Durst had shaved his head as well as his eyebrows, and Jarecki asked him about that. Durst said that he did it to disguise himself and that people looked weird because when they didn't have their eyebrows. You know, that would make him not look like himself kind of thing. And Jarecki then asked him, "So that was intentional?" To which Durst responded, "How do you accidentally shave off your eyebrows?" Sorry, I thought that was
pretty
funny.
funny.
Yeah, I laughed pretty hard at that. So Durst also used his time on the run to stalk his brother Douglas, visiting the driveway of his home in Katona, New York, while armed, thus why Douglas Durst hired a bodyguard. Robert Durst was eventually extradited to Texas, and in 2003, Durst was tried for the murder of Morris Black. On the death of Morris Black, the prosecution presented the jury with only a charge of capital murder, no lesser charges. So this is strange because normally the prosecution wants to have as many charges as possible just in case one doesn't stick, the rest of them do.
Right.
So what this shows is how confident the prosecution was that they had an open and shut case on Morris Black's murder. And it would actually be their undoing.
I was just going to say, it figures. They figure they have everything wrapped up, and then they put all the eggs in the basket, and they all come tumbling out.
Well, when you have $1.8 million to spend on 2 lawyers, you're going to get your money's worth.
True that.
So Durst employed defense attorneys Dick DeGuerin and Mike Ramsey, and he claimed self-defense. Now, DeGuerin conducted 2 mock trials with Durst in preparation for this case. Durst's defense team found communicating with him to be difficult and hired psychiatrist Milton Osler to investigate. After spending 70 hours examining him, this doctor diagnosed Durst with autism and saying that his whole life's history is so compatible with this diagnosis. And his defense team argued that the diagnosis explained his behavior. Somehow, right?
Well, that's what they're going to try to claim.
So the defense did a great job of humanizing Durst and helping the jury empathize with Durst going into hiding after Janine Pirro reopened Kathy's case, stating that he didn't want to deal with being accused of something bad involving a loved one. As far as Morris Black goes, there is so little information on who he was during his life that he's literally just a side note in his own murder trial.
That's wild.
Aside from being called a cranky old man that essentially just wanted to live his simple life alone, there's not much else besides theories, which I will cover very briefly in a moment. On the day of Morris's death, Durst claimed that he was confronted by a very angry Morris. Supposedly, Morris went after a .22 caliber target pistol that Durst owned, and they began fighting over it. During the struggle for the pistol, the weapon discharged and shot Morris in the face, even though Durst claimed his fingers were not on the trigger. Then, supposedly, in shock and not wanting to have to explain the situation, especially when compared to the recently reopened case of Kathy, Durst tried to cover it all up. During cross-examination, Durst admitted to using a paring knife, 2 saws, and an axe to dismember Morris Black's body before bagging them and dumping the remains in the Galveston Bay.
Damn. He really out here just admitting to that.
Which is the only thing he can do, really.
True.
So Morris Black's head was never recovered. So prosecutors were unable to present sufficient forensic evidence to dispute Durst's account of the struggle. As a result of lack of forensics, the jury acquitted Durst of murder on November 11th, 2003.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Not fucking guilty.
Nuts.
So on December 21st, 2004, Durst pled guilty to 2 counts of bail jumping and 1 count of evidence tampering for his dismemberment of Morris's body. As part of the plea bargain, he received a sentence of 5 years and was given credit for time served, requiring him to serve only 3 more years in prison.
That's some bullshit right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some shit.
Durst was paroled on July 15th, 2005. The rules of his release required him to stay near his home, needing permission to travel. That December, Durst made an unauthorized trip to the boarding house where Morris Black was killed and was in a nearby shopping mall when he accidentally ran into the trial judge that had presided over his trial.
Damn, that's fucking unlucky for him.
Dumbass.
So due to that, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles determined that he had violated his parole and he was returned to jail, and he was released again from custody on March 1st, 2006. Now, one quick thought here. There is a theory that Morris Black and possibly his brother had either worked for the Durst organization or as a hitman that Durst might have hired. So these theories speculate that maybe Morris and or his brother had played a part in Kathy's disappearance and maybe Susan Berman's death.
Interesting.
Yeah. It is also possible that Morris was just Durst's neighbor and might have learned or had been told information by Durst, and Durst later decided to cover his tracks by killing him. Unfortunately, we'll never know. Durst's notoriety inspired the 2010 film All Good Things, the title of which is a reference to the Vermont health food store of the same name that was set up by Durst and Kathy. In the film, David Marks, the character based on Durst, was played by Ryan Gosling. And his wife, Katie, was portrayed by Kirsten Dunst. Now, for the record and spoiler alert for the movie essentially ends with the Robert Durst character leaving his wife's body in the trunk of his car for his father, Seymour, to have to deal with.
Huh.
Yeah. It's really well done, but I recommend it, but the Jinx goes into much, much better detail on the
actual realism.
Yeah. So shortly after the movie's theatrical release, Robert Durst contacted the director Andrew Jarecki and expressed his approval for the film. This led to Durst agreeing to be interviewed by Jarecki for the 2015 miniseries The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, which was broadcast on HBO. Now Max.
Damn.
Yeah, now Max, I guess. So during the production of The Jinx, Susan Berman's stepson Sarab uncovered a 1999 letter written by Durst to Susan, which contained the same Beverly Hills misspelling on the envelope that the anonymous letter that had been sent to police had also had.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Yes. So Sarab and Jarecki and his whole team, they go, and this is all in one episode of the documentary. They have handwriting experts look at it. They contact the police. They want to make sure they're doing everything above board because they know now they have evidence. So this new information led to Durst's indictment for the first-degree murder of Susan Berman, and this is all shown in the final episode of The Jinx. Now, because this was released a week at a time, on the eve of the broadcast of the final episode of Jinx, the FBI arrested Robert Durst in New Orleans.
Damn.
The final episode of The Jinx ends with Durst moving into a bathroom where he forgets that his microphone is still on. And that's what I'm going to play for you guys right now.
Oh, shit.
Nice. Let's see it.
One thing to keep in mind is that when Robert Durst is confronted throughout this documentary, sometimes he gets like he starts like burping. It's almost like he has like an indigestion problem. But anyway, so at this point here, he's been confronted with the letter, and he's been shown that the handwriting matches, and has literally been asked, can you tell the difference between this handwriting and this handwriting? And he admits that he cannot. And he's gone into the bathroom.
I'm having difficulty with the questions. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course.
Killed them all, of course. How insane is that?
That's pretty damning. Holy hell.
It's very suspicious.
Can you imagine I just the idea of like a content creator as someone who is putting together this documentary, and there it is, a fucking confession on mic.
Like, that's crazy.
Right. So at this point, one of the cool things that happened was that he had like these parties when those episodes were going on, and he invited everyone that was involved with the documentary to watch these episodes. So this final episode, he was literally, while everyone is watching the episode, Jarecki is out on the phone talking to police because they had just arrested Durst. And then the whole room watching that moment was fucking unreal.
Yeah, that's literally insane.
Yeah, because there would be a part 2 to this, because that was the final moment of the final episode. So there was a part 2 to this, and it basically picked up right when Durst was arrested, but the whole thing, like, the McCormick family were there, and they witnessed that. It was fucking crazy. So
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, that's literally nuts.
So it was in November of 2003 that HBO greenlit the part 2. So at the time of Durst's arrest, in addition to a .38 caliber revolver that was loaded with 4 live rounds and 1 spent casing, police recovered 5 ounces of marijuana, Durst's birth certificate, a passport, maps of Louisiana, Florida, and Cuba, a creepy ass flesh-toned latex mask, a fake Texas ID, and that he had used to check into a hotel, a new cell phone, and $42,000 in cash. Yeah.
You know, because you just want to keep that laying around.
Well, no, he was clearly going to run to Cuba. That's how I see it. So on March 23rd, Durst was denied bail by a Louisiana judge after prosecutors argued that he was a flight risk. Obviously.
Because obviously, yes, he is.
Exactly. On March 8th, a day after the U.S. attorney filed an independent federal weapons charge, Durst was also formally indicted by a Louisiana grand jury for carrying a weapon with a controlled substance and for the illegal possession of the firearm by a felon. Durst's trial concerning the Berman killing was also scheduled to begin in Los Angeles after he was arraigned in California, but his transfer to California was delayed due to a serious surgery. A preliminary hearing was initially scheduled for October 17th, but was postponed until April of 2018 to accommodate Durst's defense team, some of whom had suffered damage to their homes and offices after Hurricane Harvey. In October of 2018, Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge Mark Wyndham ruled that enough evidence existed to try Durst for the murder of Susan Berman and that he would be arraigned on November 8th. During his court appearance the first day, Durst pled not guilty. In January of 2019, Wyndham set Durst's trial for September 3rd of 2019. Can you imagine 9 months? Just saying, yeah, we're going to handle this in 9 months. That blows my mind.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Prosecutors would try to connect Berman's death to Kathy's disappearance, which they argued was the foundation for the motive of Susan's murder. In his ruling, the prosecutors could use evidence from the Texas Morris Black case, and Judge Wyndham said the killing of Morris Black and Susan Berman seemed to be intertwined. In a surprise move on December 21st, 2019, Durst's lawyers contradicted their previous statements filed in court documents where they then admitted that Durst did indeed write the cadaver note.
Oh, shit.
I guess money can't buy intelligence.
In August 2019, Durst's attorneys also argued what the note demonstrates is that the person who mailed it was aware that there was a body at the house, not that the individual murdered Susan Berman. So, knowing they're caught, they're basically doing whatever they can to try to weasel them out of it. On March 2nd, 2020, the proceedings were postponed because of COVID-19. Surprise, surprise.
Classic.
Long story short, on September 17th, 2021, a jury convicted Robert Durst of the first-degree murder of Susan Berman. Durst thus faced the possibility of a life sentence. Now, there are two notable moments during this trial that I want to talk about. First was when Durst claimed that he had fond memories of his childhood in the late 40s and early 50s when he would play frisbee in the backyard and play Uno with his family. The prosecution then pointed out that Uno wasn't invented until 1971 and that the frisbee wasn't invented until 1957. It was such a great moment. I loved it.
Just like, what a weird thing to lie about, my friend.
Right? It just proves he lies about everything.
Right, like, choose your lies carefully, buddy.
The second notable moment was that he admitted that he would lie to that very court just to avoid admitting that he was guilty. He literally said, when asked if he would lie about murdering Susan Berman, he said, yes, he would. Yeah.
Oh,
wow, that's really messed up.
Yep. Idiot.
He is not how you say a smooth criminal.
No, he should never have been put on that stand. That's so funny. Now I got that Michael Jackson song in my head. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So Durst was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for Susan Berman's murder. These next few things I'm going to talk about blow my fucking mind because it changes how I think about Robert Durst. Because technically he's got 3 murders under his belt. That kind of makes him a serial killer, but based on the motives, I don't really think of him as a serial killer. But police are reportedly examining connections between Durst and the disappearance of 18-year-old Lynn Schultz from Middlebury, Vermont, and 16-year-old Karen Mitchell from Eureka, California. They're also considering the possible connection between Durst and the disappearance of 18-year-old Kristen Madarafi, who was last seen in San Francisco in 1997. Lynn Schultz, a Middlebury College freshman, visited Durst's health food store on December 10, 1971, the day she disappeared, and was last seen that afternoon at a bus stop across from his store. Author and investigative journalist Matt Birkbeck reported in 2003 and again in his 2015 book A Deadly Secret that credit card reports placed Durst in Eureka, California on November 25, 1997, the day Karen Mitchell vanished. Karen may have volunteered in a homeless shelter that Durst frequented, and Durst, dressed in women's clothing, had visited a Eureka shoe store owned by Karen's aunt. Karen was last seen walking to work from her aunt's store and possibly speaking to someone in a stopped car. A witness sketch of Karen's presumed abductor resembles Durst. So he might have actually been a serial killer.
Wow, I guess we just literally don't know.
And we never will because, we're going to talk about what happens next, but holy shit is really yeah. So one last side note. On December 11th, 2000, shortly before Susan Berman's death, Durst married Deborah Lee Chariton. According to the New York Times, the couple had briefly shared their Fifth Avenue apartment in 1990, but never lived together as husband and wife. Durst once told his sister Wendy that it was a marriage of convenience. Now, while Durst was arrested for the Morris Black killing in 2001, Deborah wired him the money for his bail. She also visited Durst in jail and spoke with him on the phone on a regular basis, discussing legal strategies and other personal and business issues. Following the Morris Black trial, Deborah reportedly distanced herself from Durst and his affairs, legal or otherwise. So in particular...
All of your affairs, sir.
Right? So in particular, Deborah specifically told Durst not to get involved with the Jinx, which he disagreed with and obviously went ahead and did it anyway. So she saw the problem that was going to be. Now, Deborah's friend said that after Durst was arrested in 2015, she had not spoken with him since the documentary had begun airing in February. Shortly after Durst was convicted for murdering Susan Berman in September of 2021, a lawyer for the family of Kathy McCormick sent the Manhattan District Attorney a letter claiming that the marriage between Durst and Deborah was a sham solely to avoid and abet Durst's financial crimes and murders and to conceal those acts to frustrate investigators. Basically, because he married her, they can't make her testify against him.
Wow, that's the convenience of the marriage.
Exactly. Yep. So she basically now controls all his money, and she can't be forced to testify against him. So any knowledge she has...
Do you feel like that's a weird law?
It is a weird law.
I've always thought it was a really weird law.
It's definitely an outdated law, yeah.
I was just about to say, I want to know where that came from or what originated that.
I don't know. It's definitely an old school idea where you can't... Because I think back in the day, you could kind of sort of torture people during interrogation. So I think the idea of someone's wife getting tortured to give up information on her husband, you know what I mean? I think maybe that's... I'll have to look that up. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So on October 16th, 2021, Durst tested positive for COVID-19 and was placed on a ventilator. It is unknown how Durst contracted the virus or whether anyone else at his sentencing was affected, but he died of cardiac arrest on January 10th, 2022 at the age of 78.
Damn, this is like not the first time we've talked about COVID coming for one of these bitches, right?
Right, no, it's not. And
No.
Yeah, that was the last episode. One of the killers with Dean Coral died of COVID.
Yeah.
Yep. So in January of 2022, Kathy's family filed a wrongful death suit against Durst's estate. This was the fourth similar civil suit the family had filed since 2015, attempting to claim part of or all of Durst's assets. In response, a federal judge in the Southern District of New York ruled that Durst's second wife and heir, Deborah, may not do anything with his $100 million estate. So now she can't touch it until they make this decision. And to be fair, as I wrap this up, right now there's no more information on where that's gone. It's probably in like legal limbo right now, but
yeah,
that's where they're at. And yeah, so with Durst dead and everyone else trying to figure out what really happened, I don't think we're ever going to find out what happened to Kathy.
No, probably not. I mean, there's no information.
Yeah, she's probably out in the Pine Barrens somewhere in New Jersey, which really sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With lots of other people.
Lots and lots of other people.
Just thinking about how dark that last statement is.
Which one?
the hundreds of bodies that are buried in the pines.
I would think it's more than 100. Like I think it's a lot. It's been decades.
Being gracious. I'm being gracious
truly.
with the
I mean, just imagine how many Dean Coral fit in a boat shed.
Oh Lord, not the boat shed. Oh, I can't with the boat shed. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, please listen to last week's episode.
That's 2 weeks ago.
Oh, right, because I wasn't here last week.
Correct.
Oh, that's
right.
Yeah.
So definitely check that episode out. But thank you guys for listening to us this episode. We appreciate and love all of you. Thank you for the comments you send our way. We do see them. Thank you. And so we'll see you again soon. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.